Well, the transfer portal gives, but the transfer portal can also take away. TCU in danger of losing one of their starting safeties, a guy that we had high hopes for next season. We'll talk about it next here on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's right, Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your order. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, Locked On Horned Frogs. You can also find us wherever it is you get your podcast. We're going to talk some recruiting today. Signing day for the 2025 class, the early signing day, is tomorrow. So a lot of these guys are going to sign the dotted line. We'll get a better picture of who is enrolling early. Had a late commit from a JUCO safety in Colin Collier from Hutchinson Community College. And he plays the safety position, which is where we're going to start today because the transfer portal, a few TCU players have entered the portal or have announced their intention to enter the portal. And one of them is a starter in Jamel Johnson, who started 11 games at the safety spot for the Frogs. And he was productive. I mean, he had 71 tackles in total, 3 pass breakups, 1 forced fumble. Over his career at TCU, 90 career tackles, 3 pass breakups, and a forced fumble. I was surprised to see this. Now, a couple notes here. First is the portal doesn't officially open until December 9th. So the announcements that you're seeing now, these are guys saying, hey, I'm intending to jump in the portal when it opens. They're trying to get the paperwork done because you have to go through the compliance office, get all the right paperwork done. Then schools can contact you and you can make your next move. Johnson's been a starter pretty much all year this past season. He played a lot as a freshman too. So, I mean, around the country over the next few weeks, you're going to see highly rated kids. And TCU's had some of these instances in the last few years. Cordell Russell last offseason comes to mind. 4-star, 5-star prospects, they get to campus as freshmen. They don't see the field a whole lot. They move on. Micah Hudson at Texas Tech, 5-star plus wide receiver down at Lake Belton. Huge name. Tech lands him. He's the gem of that class, cornerstone of that class. He doesn't get on the field a whole lot. Apparently dealt with some injuries this year. He announced yesterday he's going to move on and potentially enter the portal. So Jamel is saying he intends to jump in the portal. So TCU can try to convince him not to. Also, even if he does get to the portal, that doesn't mean he's automatically going to another school. It means that TCU can try to keep him. Now, in most instances, these guys do end up moving on. The Frogs were able to keep Jonathan Bax last year after getting a new defensive coordinator in Andy Avalos, but that's a rare case. But the part of this report that stood out to me, and this is from On3. This is Pete Nakos from On3. He says, TCU safety Jamel Johnson plans to enter the transfer portal, according to his agent, Noah Reinsfeld. And then he goes on to a list of stats. Given that an agent is involved in this announcement, I think that means he's looking for more money. And, hey, that's fine. That's the new world of college football. You can step into the portal and you can test the market. You can say, hey, this is what I'm making. What do you guys got? And I would imagine that his agent's going to handle most of those negotiations. It wasn't public, but from everything we know now, TCU dealt with a similar situation with Dominic Williams last season. So you have to make a decision. You have to prioritize these things. You're working with a certain amount of funds. Every school is. But Jamel was a productive player, and I would hope that TCU at least has a conversation with them and sees, okay, what would it take to keep you here? Now, there were times this season I saw it when I retweeted this yesterday, Rebel Frog, who's a frequent listener to the show and chimes in a lot on social media, he responded and he was like, well, this was a guy that at times it didn't look like he was really looking for contact or looking to make tackles. And I noticed that too. But that being said, he still made 71 tackles. And there were times where he got down in the box and made plays. I will say this. In that Cincinnati game, I did think it was weird. Brendan Sorsby scored a touchdown in the fourth quarter to make it 20-13. Maybe it was late in the third quarter. But he scores a touchdown to make it 20-13. And he kept it on his own read. TCU wasn't aligned very well. There was nobody home. But Jamel had a chance if he sticks his foot in the ground and comes downhill. It looked like he had a shot to put a lick on Sorsby and keep him from getting in the end zone. It was 3rd and goal, so it would have set up a 4th and short, probably at the 2 or at the 1 yard line, but it would have given TCU a chance to get lined up and make a stop. And Sorsby kind of ran over him. And at the time, I was like, maybe it was just the snow, the cold, not great conditions. I get it. These players, a lot of them are Texas guys. They're not used to this. So he slipped or he wasn't ready for it, whatever the case is. Whether this is right or wrong, now that he's in the portal, my thoughts I wonder what happened there. But he's an athletic player. He's a good player. There's no way to sugarcoat this or spin this. This is a pretty significant loss, especially considering everything that TCU is losing at the safety position. Bud Clark's going to be moving on. Cam Smith, the Memphis transfer, who made some plays late in the season, he'll be gone. Abe Kamara, I assume he's out of eligibility. I think he walked on senior day, so I believe he'll also not be with the program following this season. So it's weird in that, Johnson had a chance to be the dude in that position group coming into the season. And now you're going to be relying on a lot of young players. Richard Toney Jr. is not a young player, but he transferred in from Nevada in the offseason, came over when Ken Wilson made the move from head coach at Nevada to linebackers coach here at TCU. He was let go at Nevada. I guess I should say that. It wasn't like he left his head coaching position and came to be a linebackers coach. But you guys know what I mean. Richard Toney Jr., Austin Jordan, who's played some corner and safety. He's a Texas transfer. He got some more run in the back half of the year. So that's a name to know. And you got a couple young guys coming in who will be signing potentially tomorrow, like Julius Sims, but not a lot of experience now at that safety spot. Now, last offseason, that was a position where Andy Avalos was very aggressive in the transfer portal. And there's usually corners and safeties available that have experience. It's kind of like wide receiver. You can find them. Doesn't mean they're always a great fit for what you want to do, but you can find those players and get them to, plug into your defense in this upcoming year. But that now becomes a priority for TCU. And we'll see what happens. Maybe this is just, hey, I've been here 2 years. I've done a lot of good things. I've made a lot of plays. I need to know how much you want me here. And if that's the case, I hope TCU can come to an agreement with them. But the coaching staff has to make these tough choices now. It's one of the reasons why Mac Brown was at North Carolina. He had a press conference after the NC State game, which they lost, and Mac is retiring. Now, whether that was his own decision fully or the people at North Carolina said, hey, we need you to move on, I don't know. But one thing he said at the end of his press conference was, this version of college football is not what I signed up for. And I'm not saying this to make you have sympathy for these guys. They're getting paid very well. It's a great job. There's a lot of people around the country that would want to do it. I'm just pointing out there's a lot of responsibilities now with being a head coach of a football team at this level that weren't really a thing even 5 years ago. So Sonny Dykes and the staff have to figure out how they want to handle that. But Jamel Johnson announced his intention to enter the transfer portal. Starting safety, pretty big loss. A couple other guys that jumped in that are not necessarily surprising, but names that I'm going to miss. Shad Banks will always have that interception against Baylor where he sealed the game in 2021. Shad's a great athlete, very intriguing player. He was a great player at North Shore High School. He came in that class with Zach Evans, and that was when North Shore was the program in 6A. It was between them and Duncanville each and every year, and they had college athletes all around the field. And on one of the best teams at the highest level of football in Texas high school football, Shad was playing both ways. He played some receiver, he played some linebacker, and you saw the athleticism through the years. You saw times where he really popped. In 2022, he became a pretty important rotational piece. When they had injuries, when Johnny Hodges was banged up, he played a lot in that Baylor game. And I thought he would be one of the guys that would be really intriguing with a new DC and just kind of getting a fresh start and a clean slate. Unfortunately, this year he dealt with injuries, and he's been behind. I mean, he's behind Namdi. He's been behind Johnny for a few years. I was hoping he would stick it out because I know like Caleb Alarmzor is coming in, or he's been here, but he'll get more playing time this upcoming season, and he should be your dude in the middle, you would think. Max Carroll has been a great special teams player for TCU over the past few seasons, and I think he's ready to step up and make a move. Jonathan Bax is another name to know, even though he'll be more at that stud linebacker position. Kylan Salter, you got some incoming freshmen, but I felt like Shad, if he gave it one more chance, could crack the rotation and make more of an impact. One thing to note, though, sometimes guys enter the portal on their own accord. Sometimes it's the coaching staff saying, hey, we need you to move on. I don't know what the case was here. I think it could have gone either way, but whether it was his decision or the coaching staff saying, you know what, we think we got some other guys that are going to get preference, at least going into the year, I wish him the best. He was always an intriguing player, always a super intriguing athlete, and I hope that it works out for him wherever he ends up. Another name, Terrence Cooks, and this is a guy, once again, dealt with injuries for really 3 seasons. I believe he was the first transfer commit that Sonny got in 2022, that summer. I mean, he was one of the first I know. Came over from Texas, was an intriguing name, former 4-star athlete, and got hurt during either spring practice or fall practice, ended up having to have surgery. He was out for the year. Never really was a factor after that. Dealt with some other injuries. And then this year, I remember in the Kansas game, he came in and made a few plays. And that Monday after the KU game, he was one of the guys that I noted in like my notes of, hey, he got in there, he made some tackles. Like, it was cool to see that. Maybe this is his chance to start making more meaningful snaps, but it didn't happen. So Terrence is going to move on, and I think he has one more year of eligibility. So best of luck to him. I hope he finds a good place. But those are your 3 right now: Max Carroll, Terrence Cooks at linebacker, and then the biggest name, Jamel Johnson, your safety, starting safety, one of those guys that was an impact player for you this past year. His name also in the portal. I assume we're going to see some more over the next week or so. The big key for TCU, and one bummer about Johnson and his move is that's another highly talented recruit that you've lost in the last few seasons. You know, there's Rondon Fontenette, Cordell Russell, Javion Wilcox. There's a number of dudes who have moved on other places. And to a certain extent, that's the world we live in now with college football, but it's still disappointing that you can't keep some of that talent in-house. When we come back, some positive news for Jack Bech, and also TCU did land a new commit for 2025. We'll talk about that and more coming up here on Locked on Horned Frogs, your team every day. Shout out to Gametime. You can download the Gametime app today. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Do you want to go to the women's game on Wednesday against Florida Atlantic, or Sunday, Dickies Arena, number 9 ranked TCU women's basketball team, by the way. Net rankings came out yesterday, and they were number 5 in the country. Let's not talk about where the men were in the net rankings currently, because that's not great news. But women got a huge game coming up on Sunday at Dickies Arena. You can find tickets for that matchup on the Gametime app. Again, the code is LOCKEDONCollege. $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions, as always, do apply. Gametime, they make it easy for you. We appreciate their sponsorship of the Locked On Network. Okay, so it's been a little bit. It's not been that long since I talked to you guys, but there's been a lot of news in the last 24, 48 hours. I made the rare decision to record on Sunday afternoon for Monday's show, and it kind of blew up in my face because after I recorded, there were 3 or 4 things that happened that were newsworthy. One of those, and Frog Fan pointed this out in the YouTube comments yesterday, Jack Bech, we have some news on his timetable. It was a knee injury. but it's not a torn ACL or anything like that. He is going to be out for 4 to 6 weeks and will work his way back in the rehab process. This is Lon Phillip Sullivan. He was actually an LSU reporter, but if you remember, Jack spent some time at LSU, so I guess just still has good ties there. Lon's from LSUodyssey.com. Blitnikoff semifinalist wide receiver Jack Bech suffered what looked like to be a serious knee injury last night. Today, the MRI results came back positive for an MCL injury, out 4 to 6 weeks. No meniscus damage after many feared the worst. So great news there. Now, what does it mean for TCU? Not a whole lot for the team itself because he's not going to play in the bowl game. I don't know if that was a possibility anyway. I thought between the two players, Savion and Jack, that will most likely opt out. Jack Bech would be more likely to play. But now that he's going to be rehabbing this knee injury, that's out of the question. As far as NFL preparation goes, though, 4 to 6 weeks, talking about a couple months there, hopefully should have time to get back in good shape to go through NFL draft testing. Now, I don't know if he'll forgo the combine stuff if he gets invited or some of the pro day things because maybe he's back but not 100% and ready to put up great numbers in that type of environment. But overall, really can't ask for better news. No structural damage to the meniscus, MCL issue, do some rehab, get back. And that's just fantastic. I mean, he's a great player. Seems like a really great dude. Had a breakout season. They move him to outside wide receiver. And I don't know what the process was. Sonny in the postgame after the Stanford game made it sound like that was a last-minute decision, that they had injuries at outside wide receiver and they had some availability issues with some different guys. So it was just like, hey, we need somebody out there. And Josh Weaver said, I trust Jack Bech to go make plays, and they ran with it. Now, whether that was the case or a few weeks before the season or even during spring camp, because during spring camp, Sonny was like, Jack was the MVP. He just kept making play after play. If they saw it then and they said to themselves, we got to find a way to get this dude out of the slot and out of that like H-back tight end spot because he's just too dynamic. It was a great move. Had over 1,000 yards receiving. Kind of slowed down a little bit as the year went on, but still was super productive. And who knows? I mean, he might have had a big game against Cincinnati, had that injury early in the ball game, and couldn't play through it. But Godspeed to him as he recovers and rehabs, and I hope for him and the family they can just get back quickly and have him ready for NFL draft preparation because he's played his way into that conversation for sure, which is awesome to see. I'm not sure how much he was on the radar of a lot of scouts before the season and just had an incredible senior year or junior year, but he's technically been around for 4 seasons. Also, TCU lands another JUCO player. That's now 4 junior college players over the past week. Hutchinson Community College, which is in Kansas. It's one of the premier JUCO programs in the country. Safety Colin Collier committed to the Frogs. He's 6 feet tall, 185 pounds. Jeremy Clark from 247 Sports said that he chose TCU over Kentucky and other schools. And he says that he thinks TCU is a program on the rise. And we talked in the last segment that this is going to be a spot where immediate impact players are needed. So, again, this feels like an evaluation that they made. And they said, you know what, we believe in this guy. With the scholarship limits the way they are now, teams have more flexibility to go get players. And so maybe we'll see more of this. Just players that aren't necessarily getting tons of offers from anybody and everybody, but that the team likes, that they feel like they have scouted and evaluated well, and they have room for them. It's a position in need now. So Collier joins Kelton Mickle and Perry Cole, the 2 defensive tackles who also committed from the JUCO ranks earlier this past week as players who are going to come in and try to make an immediate impact. And then one more quick note on the recruiting front as we approach signing day. I also saw this from Mike Roach. He wrote this story today. Ty Haywood, who's a 5-star offensive tackle. He's been committed to Alabama since July. I did an episode about him during the summer because he made an official visit to TCU and it was a big deal at the time. He's a very highly rated prospect. According to Mike Roach from 247 Sports, he is not going to sign early. and it looks like he might not end up at Alabama. He's been talking with Michigan lately. He's also circled back with Oklahoma and Texas A&M. But at the end of the story, Roach says this: Haywood visited Florida State and TCU during his first round of official visits, but it's unclear if those programs will be ready to double back. Michigan should be considered the favorite for Haywood as his recruitment heads into the new year. So Haywood's from Denton Ryan. Dillon, Arkansas, who's part of this TCU class, also Denton Ryan player. He apparently is not going to sign early, which, according to Mike Roach, didn't sit well with Alabama personnel. So now his recruitment's kind of back open. He hasn't decommitted publicly, but I guess he's ready to talk to different schools. So I think TCU needs to be aggressive here if they can be. I do feel like it's a little weird that some of the schools that were mentioned, like Texas A&M and Oklahoma, aren't being more aggressive at this time, but maybe it's just a simple fact of like, hey, we got our guys. We really don't want to take on another offensive lineman. And I'm sure Ty probably comes with a pretty good price tag because it's difficult to find 5-star players like that at that position. But man, I would double back in a big way. Now, maybe it's just like, hey, it's Michigan. There's not much of a chance there. But at least get on the phone because, my goodness, this is a big-time player with great physical tools and should be able to step in. And, rarely do freshman linemen contribute immediately, but I don't think it would take long for Ty Haywood to get up to speed, even if he is someone who doesn't come in early and comes in during the next fall semester. When we come back, we'll get some of your thoughts. It's Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team. We do it here every day. FanDuel, it's where the game starts. Thank you to FanDuel for being a proud sponsor and a loyal sponsor of the Locked On Network for such a long time. One $5 bet. You win that bet, you get $150 on bonus bets. FanDuel.com. You can also download the FanDuel app to make it super easy and convenient for you. NFL, NBA Cup going on right now. Mavericks playing Memphis tonight, trying to secure that wild card spot in the play-in tournament. FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app. No TCU game this week, but the Big 12 title game, Arizona State and Iowa State. You can bet on all that and more. Again, one $5 wager gets you $150 in bonus bets. FanDuel, it's where the game starts. So I asked this question on Monday. Or not really this question. I guess it was a question. I'm doing great. Really articulate podcaster here, reporting for duty. My theory or my take was, I know a lot of people are looking at this season as a missed opportunity because of the way the schedule ended up breaking. And if they could have found a way to handle their business against UCF and Houston, TCU could be that team in Arlington this week, taking on Arizona State or taking on Iowa State. But my opinion was, sometimes you got to learn how to win. And it's painful and it's not fun because you lose games to do that. This team made some necessary adjustments after some early season setbacks that if they would have survived those games, I'm not sure they would have made those changes. And then maybe they get tripped up down the road. So I just kind of threw that out there. What do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Richard said, I believe the changes made midseason were the coaches trying to save their jobs versus developing the players they had. They said, we can't run. Let's try out the biggest guy on the field and ride him to safety. I don't feel if the running back room got any better. He would like to see a new O-line coach and says Hoover will have to develop some style of running game. Desperation does drive ingenuity in some cases. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of pressure on this coaching staff after the issues that happened early in the year, and they made that change in the running game. I'll push back a little bit on the running back thing. I think Cam Cook improved towards the end of the season. Now, I don't think he got a lot of opportunities, which I take some issue with that, but I understand, you're trying to win games. You found a way to run the ball, and you sort of stuck with that. Jeremy Payne is another guy that I like. I just don't believe he got a ton of chances to really get in a rhythm. So hopefully that's something that they can lean into more next year. Vince says he's tough on the Horned Frogs because he was a Horned Frog. He remembers when weight room was only 1,000 square feet and they were wearing 10-year-old jerseys. As a team, they overcame a lot of obstacles. They beat Texas for the first time in 20 years, and then they became a program that beat them on a regular basis. They got in the top 25. They've come a long way. And right now he sees a journeyman coach with a famous last name that somehow finds his way into successful situations and gets out of them before he gets exposed. And he says he knows, I know that he's right. And he thinks that TCU being 8-4 is not because of Sonny, but in spite of him. Vince Pryor, consistently not a Sonny Dykes fan, which is fine. That's what we're here to talk about. Yeah, I mean, Vince, I appreciate you, man. I appreciate all the sacrifices you made. I know you have a different perspective and a different understanding of the game than I do. And also, I know it probably means more to you. I'm sure it does mean more to you because you put sweat equity into this. I mean, you helped build what this is today, and I didn't. I will say I think he made some changes this year that helped this team move forward. Now, I still feel like there's a lot of pressure on him going into 2025. He's got to build on that. But I wouldn't say they're 8-4 completely in spite of who he is and what he does. I think he recognized some things had to change, and they got it done. Apollo says it was missed opportunity. Matt Clark says, I'm not particularly impressed with the season because the schedule is much easier. If we can build on this year and make a respectable run game and a good defense, there might be something to look forward to. Yeah, that's the key. I mean, I said it in the show. I was like, listen, I think they did some good things. Now the question is going to be, can you use it to spring forward into the next season and continue to get better? And if they can't, then we'll look back on this and just say, well, they had a nice little run at the end of this year, but it was kind of smoke and mirrors. But I'm hoping that's not the case, and we'll get a great picture of that tomorrow during signing day. I've reached out to all of the high school coaches of the 2025 commits. I've got some great stories, responses about who these players are. I'm going to share some of that with you tomorrow. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team. We do it here every day. We're free and available wherever you get the podcast.